Hi, Emily. I want to turn this first chapter over to you for a review before I send it on to Susan Tanner. And I want to talk about how some of my thinking has changed. So, what I see as the goal of this first chapter is to really get students to buy in, to get them excited about writing proposals and seeing this kind of writing that on its surface, it's not beautiful writing, but to see the complexity in it and the kind of problem solving that they have to do. Now, a couple things. A lot of my comments on the margin, if the comments seem weird, it's text that I have deleted, that I'm just kind of holding on to. What I'm really interested in you addressing is looking at the vocabulary. One question I have is that as we're at this diagram here, if power channels should be changed to communication channels, and if we should call the whole thing something other than social accountability. I'm not sure, and I think I might have switched terms in my writing here. And I'm also looking for any terms that kind of drop out or switch or unclear. My thinking with vocabulary is you want to be parsimonious with any kind of vocabulary you introduce into a classroom. Like it really needs to do its work. So I want to make sure that we're doing that. And then I'm interested in any thoughts you have on the activities. Now, you'll realize that this looks very different from what you drafted earlier. And I have taken out those examples that you did, all the case studies, but I think I'm going to put those in on the chapter on researching proposals. And so if we look at the table of comments here, I haven't updated chapter 1, but chapter 2, oh, I thought I updated these. I updated the local document on my computer. I changed chapter 2 to the main concept that proposals are really flexible genre and that we need to look at kind of a range of things. And I want students to inductively kind of figure out what kinds of things are essential and non-essential in a proposal. And then chapter 3 will be focusing on research. And that's where I think those sample activities would be really good to have students sort of brainstorm what kinds of research would need to be done. You will also see that I have started an instructor's manual in the shared document where I'm putting some of the answers and responses to some of the exercises. I'm doing that kind of haphazardly at the moment. And I hope when I teach this in the spring that I'll populate that document at that time. Look at what you've been drafting on chapter 4, even though you haven't told me it's ready yet. One comment that I have, just a couple high-level things. I would like to see more examples of writing and more activities that get students to kind of figure out for themselves what are the criteria. I think going through the opportunity, so showing maybe 2 examples up front of a good and a bad one, and having students brainstorm what's the difference. That really makes a big difference in terms of learning here. So especially if on these examples here, I'd like to just see more examples of writing, and maybe some things that are not just student focused, but also workplace focused, more real world focused. And I've started a folder in the shared box thing of sample proposals I have copied in there, mostly just various proposals I've written in the past couple of years. as a way of thinking about things. And then I've started just Googling some stuff and finding some things that are out there in the wild. I really like this example of the international student. I think that's a really good one. I actually, though, when I read this, I thought it was kind of effective because there's so many things that somebody could do to solve this problem and so many small things. So again, I think we need to look at the student writing here. Now, here in this Debbie Downer section, you start getting into some student writing. I think this is really effective. How I would change this exercise is put up A and B together. So don't narrate it. Show them the two examples and say, what do you think? And have them do that as an activity first. Then go ahead and maybe explain some the key lesson that you want them to get from it, and then maybe give them some more samples to kind of evaluate on how much of a Debbie Downer is this, how effective is this in describing the problem. And I would include some of your research in here. So we did an analysis of freshman and graduate student essays, and here's what we found. I think that's really kind of compelling. And what we really want to do here is encourage student maturation, encourage more mature thinking about things. And so that includes thinking about audience in a different way, and not just being a whiner, but being someone who's seen as positive, maybe pro-social approaches to problems. So in terms of finding samples of student writing, you can do a couple things. One is, I think the best way to do it is just to find some proposals from the corpus that you have, and then rewrite it to obscure details and kind of do things that are representative to show a problem that you want to illustrate. But we also want to get some examples of more professional ones and say, hey, here's a successful one. One thing that I think would be really helpful is if you can just brainstorm any proposals that you have written, go ahead and upload into that folder like a proposal for an independent study. Or I know you did a proposal for teaching that wasn't successful, but could be a useful one to think about, like, oh, why wasn't it? That just put in some different ones up there. So in sum, what I'm suggesting is just a little bit more student writing in here, and much more, instead of telling students, much more having them figure it out and then say, oh, here's my approach. Here's what we said. If you look at my sample chapter here, you'll see just kind of quickly I tried to move to some exercises. And I have both exercises and then things that are for discussion, where I don't think it would be useful for students to write it down, but useful for them to talk about. And then we can put in the instructor's manuals how the class instructor might lead students through this. One of the things that I think is really useful is that the book can kind of teach itself here. Also, just in terms of formatting, I like to put all of the exercises and for discussion things in a table with one cell and a gray background, just so I can that visually helps me with the layout here. Great, but I'm really glad to see that you're making some progress and thinking through some examples of possible student projects. I just think some more actual writing for students to analyze would be really helpful there.